The fruit lodged in Tamaki Shimada's throat at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like jasmine and impending death. Lesedin Kosi had been in Korea for exactly 93 days. 93 days of bowing lower than her spine wanted to bend, of making herself smaller in rooms that already treated her like a shadow, of perfecting the art of existing without being seen. The Shimada estate paid well, better than anything she could find in Johannesburg, and the money she wired home every month was building her brother's future 1,001 at a time. If this story hits you, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from. It really helps us know our audience, and we'll appreciate it. She was nobody, a maid in a blue uniform with white trim, carrying a silver tray of sliced persimmons and afternoon tea to a woman whose name made grown men flinch. Tamaki Shimada, 78 pounds of silk and steel. The matriarch who had buried her husband, raised a son in blood and tradition, and ruled Seoul's underworld from a wheelchair she didn't need yet, but kept close like a promise. Her heart was failing. Everyone knew. No one spoke of it. The sound Tamaki made when the fruit stuck wasn't dramatic. Just a small, wet gasp that could have been mistaken for a cough. But Lesedi had grown up as the oldest of 5, had pulled food from her baby sister's throat when she was 12, had learned that death announces itself quietly before it takes. The other staff froze. 3 women in identical uniforms, hands pressed to mouths, eyes wide with the particular terror of watching your employer die and knowing you'll be blamed. Lesedi didn't think. Thinking was a luxury for people who belonged in places like this. She dropped the tray. Porcelain shattered. Tea spread across marble like spilled blood. Her hands, dark against Tamaki's pale silk hanbok, wrapped around the elderly woman's fragile ribcage. 1 thrust. 2. The third dislodged a piece of golden persimmon that hit the floor with a wet sound that would replay in Lesedi's dreams for weeks. Tamaki sucked in air like she was being born again. Her hand shot up, fingers surprisingly strong, gripping Lesedi's wrist with the strength of someone who'd once strangled a man with piano wire. Their eyes met. Lesedi saw her own terrified reflection in those dark, knowing irises. "You," Tamaki whispered in Korean, then switched to heavily accented English. "You will marry my son." The words hung in the air like a death sentence dressed as salvation. Outside, a black Mercedes pulled through the gates, carrying a man who didn't know his entire life had just changed. Kizashi Shimada entered the room like winter, silent, absolute, and capable of killing anything still blooming. Lesedi had seen photographs. The entire staff whispered about him in the kitchen after midnight, voices low like prayers to a dangerous god. But photographs didn't capture the way oxygen seemed to rearrange itself around him, or how his presence made the massive drawing room feel suddenly cramped. He was tall for a Korean man, broader through the shoulders than his tailored black suit suggested. Tattoos crept up his neck, a dragon's tail that disappeared beneath his collar, marking him as Yakuza even in expensive Italian wool. His face was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, precise, cold, designed to cut. He looked at the broken porcelain first, then at his mother, who sat in her chair like a queen on a throne, one hand still gripping Lesedi's wrist. Finally, his eyes landed on Lesedi, and she understood why men confessed to crimes they didn't commit under that gaze. "Iyama," he said, his voice rough silk. "Mother, what happened?" "I was choking," Tamaki announced with theatrical flair that would have been comedic if the room wasn't vibrating with tension. "This girl saved my life. So naturally, she will be your wife." The silence that followed could have suffocated someone. Kizashi's expression didn't change. That was somehow worse than anger. "No, I wasn't asking." "Mother." "She saved me, Kizashi. Me. Your mother. The universe has spoken." Lesedi's wrist was starting to hurt. She tried to pull away gently, but Tamaki's grip was ironclad. This woman, who supposedly had a failing heart, was holding on like she could anchor Lesedi to this insanity through sheer will. "With respect," Lesedi said, her voice admirably steady considering her entire nervous system was screaming, "I don't want to marry anyone. I have a contract. I'm just the maid." Kizashi's eyes snapped to her. For a moment, something flickered there. Surprise that she'd spoken? Appreciation? A shopping list? His face was unreadable. "You see," he said to his mother in Korean, apparently assuming Lesedi couldn't understand. She'd been taking lessons in secret, hoarding vocabulary like weapons. "She doesn't want this either. Let her go back to her duties." "I've already called Attorney Han," Tamaki replied sweetly. "Lesedi's contract has been updated. Her visa status is now dependent on family sponsorship. If she tries to leave the country in the next 6 months, there will be complications." Lesedi's blood turned to ice. "You can't do that." "I just did." Kizashi stepped closer, and Lesedi's body made the executive decision to stop breathing. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something darker, gunpowder, maybe, or just power. "Forget this happened," he said to her in English, each word carefully placed. "Return to your quarters. This changes nothing." But Tamaki smiled like a woman holding all the cards in a game. Lesedi didn't even know she was playing. "We'll see," the old woman whispered. They moved Lesedi's things at dawn while she was still processing the impossibility of her situation. She returned from the kitchen, where she'd hidden for 2 hours pretending to inventory rice, to find her small room in the servants' wing empty. Her battered suitcase, her extra uniform, the framed photo of her siblings that she kissed every night before bed. All gone. In their place, a note in Tamaki's elegant handwriting. * guest suite. East wing. 3rd door past the Jade Buddha. Dinner is at 8. Do not be late. *. The guest suite was larger than her entire childhood home. The bathroom alone could fit 3 people comfortably, which seemed excessive until Lesedi realized that excess was the point. The closet contained clothes in her exact size, dresses she'd never wear, shoes that cost more than her monthly salary, and one traditional hanbok in deep blue silk that made her throat tight. She wanted to cry. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to call her mother and explain that she'd somehow stumbled into a K-drama written by someone on hallucinogens. Instead, she stood in front of the full-length mirror at 7:47 p.m., wearing her own clothes, jeans and a simple black blouse, like armor against whatever fresh nightmare awaited. The dining room was designed to make people feel small. Vaulted ceilings, a table that could seat 20, and enough awkward silence to choke on. Tamaki sat at the head in a wheelchair she definitely didn't need, looking pleased with herself. Kizashi sat to her right, his face carved from granite and bad decisions. Lesedi was directed to sit across from him. "So," Tamaki said brightly, as staff brought out the first course. "We should discuss the wedding date." Kizashi's chopsticks paused halfway to his mouth. "There will be no wedding. Spring is lovely. Cherry blossoms. Very romantic. Mother. Or we could do winter. Lesedi looks beautiful in white, I imagine." Lesedi stabbed a piece of grilled mackerel with more violence than necessary. The fish had done nothing to deserve this, but neither had she, and yet here they were. "I don't look good in white," she said flatly. "It washes me out." Kizashi's eyes snapped to hers. For exactly 1 second, she could have sworn she saw his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement that they were both prisoners at this absurd table. "Red then," Tamaki continued, undeterred. "Red is lucky." The rest of dinner passed in excruciating silence. Lesedi counted the courses. 7. She counted the number of times Kizashi looked at her. 12, each glance sharp and assessing, like he was calculating her net worth as a liability. She counted the ways her life had derailed. Infinite. As staff cleared the final plates, Tamaki yawned delicately. I'm tired. You two should talk. Get to know each other. That won't be necessary, Kizashi said. But Tamaki was already being wheeled away, and her parting words floated back like a curse disguised as blessing. Lesedi saved my life, which means she saved yours too, my son. Everything you have exists because I'm still breathing. Remember that. The door closed. Lesedi and Kizashi stared at each other across the table like opponents in a game where neither knew the rules. This is insane, Lesedi said. Yes, Kizashi agreed. It was the first honest thing either of them had said all night. The doctor's office was in Gangnam, tucked between a luxury spa and a plastic surgery clinic that advertised Western features with before and after photos that made Lesedi's stomach turn. Tamaki had requested her presence at 10 a.m., not asked, requested. The same way emperors requested your head on a platter. You'll accompany me, she'd said that morning over breakfast, that Lesedi definitely didn't want to attend. A daughter should be present for these things. Kizashi had looked up from his phone, jaw tight. She's not your daughter. Not yet. The car was a Mercedes that cost more than Lesedi would earn in 5 years. The driver didn't acknowledge her existence. The bodyguard in the passenger seat had a gun that he didn't bother hiding. Tamaki sat beside Lesedi in the back, humming something that might have been a lullaby or a funeral dirge. You're wondering why? Tamaki said in English, her accent thick but her words chosen with surgical precision. Lesedi had been staring out the window, watching Seoul blur past, a city that still didn't feel real, that treated her like an exotic curiosity at best and an unwelcome intrusion at worst. About which part? The kidnapping or the forced marriage? Tamaki laughed, and it sounded like wind chimes before a storm. You have spine. Good. You'll need it. I don't want to need it. I want to go home. Home to what? A job that pays you nothing? A country that sees you and sees only labor. Tamaki's hand, papery and cool, settled over Lesedi's. I researched you, child. Single mother, deceased father. For younger siblings depending on the money you send. You're drowning slowly, and you've convinced yourself it's swimming. The accuracy was a slap. Lesedi pulled her hand away. You had no right. I had every right. You saved my life. That creates a debt. In my world, debts are paid in blood or bonds. Tamaki paused. I chose bonds. The doctor's office was all white walls and expensive equipment. Dr. Kim was young, competent, and clearly terrified of his patient. He performed the examination with hands that trembled slightly, checking Tamaki's vitals, asking questions in Korean that Tamaki answered with increasing impatience. Lesedi sat in the corner, trying to be invisible, her default setting. But she understood enough Korean now to catch the important words. Heart failure. Deteriorating. 6 months, maybe less. Her breath caught. Tamaki heard it. Of course she did. When Dr. Kim left to prepare the medication, the old woman turned to Lesedi with eyes that had seen too much and somehow still wanted more. Now you know, she said simply. Does he know? Lesedi whispered. Kizashi. He knows I'm dying. He doesn't know how soon. Tamaki's voice cracked, just slightly. The first real emotion Lesedi had seen from her. My husband died in front of him when he was 12. Bullet to the head. Kizashi held him while he bled out. It made him what he is, powerful, feared, untouchable, and utterly alone. Lesedi felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous like empathy. I don't need much time, Tamaki continued. Just enough to know he won't be alone when I'm gone. That someone will see him as human, not monster. You looked at him at dinner last night, and you weren't afraid. Everyone is afraid of my son, Lessetti. Everyone but you. I was terrified, Lessetti admitted. But you still spoke. You still argued. You still existed in his presence without shrinking. Tamaki leaned forward, and her next words were a weapon wrapped in silk. I'm not asking you to love him. I'm asking you not to abandon him. When I do. Lessetti found him at 2 a.m. in a room she wasn't supposed to know existed. She'd been wandering. Sleep was impossible in a bed that cost more than her dignity, in a room that echoed with the ghost of a life she'd never chosen. The East Wing was supposed to be off limits. Staff had made that clear with nervous glances and quick subject changes. But Lessetti had spent her whole life in places she didn't belong, and at this point, what was one more trespass? The door was slightly ajar, spilling cold blue light into the hallway. She should have walked past, should have returned to her gilded cage, and counted the days until Tamaki's lawyers found whatever loophole would let her escape. Instead, she pushed the door open. The room was a shrine to violence. Wall-to-wall monitors displaying security footage, some live, some archived. Filing cabinets with labels in Korean and Japanese. A desk covered in photographs. Crime scenes, she realized with creeping horror. Bodies. Blood. The infrastructure of an empire built on fear. Kizashi sat in the center of it all, tie loosened, jacket discarded, watching footage from what looked like 15 years ago based on the timestamp. A younger version of him. Maybe 19, already tall but not yet filled into his frame, stood over a man on his knees. The silent video showed the younger Kizashi raise a gun. The man on his knees didn't beg. The gun fired. The body fell. Lessetti's sharp intake of breath cut through the room's mechanical hum. Kizashi didn't startle. He paused the video with one hand, reached for the glass of whiskey with the other, and only then turned to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, and utterly devoid of the cold control he wore like armor during the day. You shouldn't be here, he said in English. His voice was rougher than usual, scraped raw by something that might have been regret or just reality. I couldn't sleep. So, you decided to tour the House of Horrors. A bitter smile tugged at his mouth. The exit is behind you. I won't stop you. But Lessetti's feet, treacherous things, carried her forward instead. She looked at the pause screen, at the boy with a gun, at the moment someone became a killer. How old were you? 19. 3 months after my father's funeral. Kizashi took a long drink. That man helped plan the hit. He ate at our table, called me nephew, put 3 bullets in my father's skull while I watched. The room felt colder. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. But his hand trembled slightly as he set down the glass, and Lessetti understood with sudden, terrible clarity that he was lying. To her. To himself. To the ghost of that 19-year-old boy who'd had to become a monster to survive. She should have left. Should have run back to her room and started counting down the hours until she could escape this world of blood and beautiful lies. Instead, she pulled up a chair and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Your mother told me today that you're not a monster, Lessetti said quietly. I didn't believe her. Kizashi's laugh was sharp, humorless. Smart woman. But then I thought about what makes a monster. My father, her throat tightened. She hadn't spoken about this in years. He drank. Every night. Every morning. He'd come home, and my mother would hide us in the bedroom. And we'd listen to him destroy our house 1 bottle at a time. When he died, everyone said nice things at the funeral. What a good man. What a tragedy. Kizashi was looking at her now, really looking, and she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the cameras surrounding them. I was 12, she continued. And I was relieved, grateful. I smiled at his funeral, and my mother slapped me in the bathroom afterward, called me heartless. Lesedi met Kizashi's gaze. So I know something about wearing masks, about doing terrible things and calling it survival, about people deciding who you are before you open your mouth. The silence stretched between them, heavy with confessions neither had planned to make. My mother thinks you can save me, Kizashi said finally. She's wrong. There's nothing left worth saving. Then maybe you don't need saving. Lesedi surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. Maybe you just need someone who sees you anyway. Without the legend. Without the fear. Just you. Something cracked in his expression, so fast she almost missed it. Vulnerability, raw and quickly shuddered. He reached for the computer mouse, fingers hovering over the button that would close all these windows full of ghosts. I watch this, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper, every year on the anniversary, to remember why I can't afford to be weak, why I can't let anyone close, why my mother's fantasy of grandchildren and normalcy is just that, a fantasy. When's the anniversary? Yesterday. The word hung between them like an explanation for everything. His coldness at dinner, his exhaustion now, the whiskey and the footage, and the man sitting in the dark reliving his worst moment on repeat. Lesedi did something incredibly stupid then. She reached out and closed the laptop. Kizashi stared at her hand on the computer like she'd just detonated a bomb. What are you? It's been 24 hours. The anniversary is over. You did your penance. Now stop. You don't understand. I understand that you're sitting in the dark punishing yourself for surviving. I understand that your mother is dying and you're trying to figure out how to keep breathing when she's gone. I understand. Her voice cracked. I understand what it's like to be so scared of feeling anything that you'd rather feel nothing at all. The air between them was electric, charged with words neither knew how to say. Kizashi's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and for a terrifying moment, Lesedi thought he might touch her face. Instead, he pulled back, stood abruptly, put distance between them like she was contagious. You should go back to your room. Kizashi, please. The word sounded like it cost him. Just go. Lesedi stood, her heart doing complicated things in her chest that she absolutely could not afford. At the door, she paused. Your mother told me something else today. She said everyone is afraid of you. Everyone but me. Maybe you should be. She turned back, and in the blue light of the monitors, she saw him clearly. Not a mafia boss, not a legend, just a tired man carrying ghosts he couldn't bury. Maybe, she agreed. But I'm not. She left before he could respond, her footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Behind her, she heard the soft click of the laptop opening again. The footage resuming, the cycle continuing. But in her room, sleepless and confused, Lesedi couldn't shake the memory of his eyes. How they'd looked at her not like a problem to solve or an obligation to fulfill, but like she was someone who just offered water to a man dying of thirst. And he was too afraid to drink. If this story hits you, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from. It really helps us know our audience, and we'll appreciate it. The scream came from Kizashi's office at 11:32 a.m. on a Thursday that had started deceptively normal. Lesedi was in the garden with Tamaki, reading aloud from a novel the old woman had selected, something about doomed lovers and cherry blossoms that felt uncomfortably on the nose. 3 pages in. The security alarm shattered the afternoon like a brick through stained glass. Tamaki's hand shot out, gripping Lesedi's wrist with surprising strength. Stay here. What's happening? Stay. Here. The command was absolute. But Lesedi had never been good at following orders that didn't make sense. The moment Tamaki's wheelchair disappeared into the house, flanked by guards who'd materialized from nowhere. Lesedi followed at a careful distance. The house was chaos. Men in black suits moved with military precision, voices sharp in Korean and Japanese, hands on weapons she'd pretended not to notice before. She pressed herself against a wall, making herself small, invisible, the way she'd learned to survive. Kizashi's office door was open. Inside, a young man knelt on the floor, bleeding from his mouth, surrounded by 6 men who looked ready to execute him on command. Kizashi stood in front of his desk, perfectly still, perfectly controlled, and somehow more terrifying than if he'd been screaming. In his hand, a cell phone. On the screen, photographs of Lesedi, her walking to the market 3 days ago, sitting in the garden yesterday, entering the house this morning. Each photo time-stamped, geotagged, professional. Surveillance. Who hired you? Kizashi's voice was silk over razor blades. The man on the floor spat blood. I'm just IT support. I don't. You uploaded these from our internal network to an encrypted server. Who hired you? Lesedi's breath caught. The young man, she recognized him now. Park something. He'd helped her set up her phone when she arrived, had been friendly, normal, had been taking photos of her for months. The Nakamura family, Park finally gasped. They paid me to monitor the house. I didn't know it would. They said it was just business intelligence. I swear. One of the guards moved. Lesedi didn't see the blow, just heard Park's cry of pain. Stop. Tamaki's voice cut through the violence. Her wheelchair rolled into the room, Lesedi forgotten in the hallway. Don't kill him yet. I want to know everything. That's when Kizashi saw her. Lesedi, pressed against the wall, eyes wide, finally understanding that this wasn't a K-drama or a fever dream. This was real. The danger was real. She was the target. His expression shifted, something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. Get her out of here, he said to the nearest guard. No. Lesedi's voice surprised everyone, including herself. She stepped into the room, fully, chin up, heart hammering. If this is about me, I deserve to know. Kizashi crossed the room in 4 strides. For a moment she thought he might physically remove her. Instead, he stopped inches away, close enough that she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, smell his cologne mixed with something sharper. Adrenaline. Maybe. Fear. The Nakamura family has been trying to destabilize us for years, he said, voice low and urgent. They staged the accident that nearly killed my mother last year. They've assassinated 3 of our lieutenants. And now they know about you. What does that mean? It means, Tamaki interjected, rolling closer, that you saved my life, which saved our organization's future. And now our enemies think you matter to us. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, flicked between Lesedi and her son. They're not entirely wrong, are they? Kizashi's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Park whimpered from the floor. They're planning something. I don't know what. But they kept asking about the girl's routine. When she's alone. When security is lightest. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. They're going to take her. One of the guards said what everyone was thinking. Kizashi turned back to Lesedi, and she saw it clearly now. The war happening behind his eyes. The calculation. The decision being made in real time. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Pack a bag. You're moving to the secure wing. 24-hour guard detail. You don't leave the estate without my explicit permission. You can't just. I can and I am. He stepped closer, and his next words were barely audible, meant only for her. They will take you to hurt me, to hurt her, and they will not be gentle about it. So you will follow orders, or I will have you sedated and moved anyway. Choose. Lesedi stared at him, at this man who'd become somehow real in the space of 72 hours. A man who killed without hesitation, but whose hands shook at the thought of her in danger. "I'll pack," she whispered. Something like relief crossed his face before the mask slammed back down. He turned to his men. "Find every leak, every connection to Nakamura. And someone get rid of this piece of shit before I change my mind about letting him live." As guards dragged Park away, Lesedi met Tamaki's knowing gaze across the room. The old woman smiled, small, sad, satisfied. "Welcome to the family, child," she said softly. "I'm sorry it had to be this way." The secure wing had no windows. Lesedi noticed this immediately, how the suite they'd moved her to was beautiful, expensive, suffocating. Silk wallpaper in cream and gold. A bed large enough to get lost in. A bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. And not a single window. Just elegant walls closing in like a velvet coffin. She'd been there for 4 days. For days of guards outside her door. Cameras in every corner. Meals brought on trays like she was royalty or a prisoner. The line between the two increasingly blurred. 4 days of Tamaki visiting with books and tea and updates delivered in her matter-of-fact way. The Nakamura family has gone quiet. That's when they're most dangerous. 4 days of not seeing Kizashi at all. On the 5th morning, Lesedi made a decision. She was South African. Her ancestors had survived colonization, apartheid, and poverty that would break most people. She would not be broken by a windowless room and a man too scared to face her. She found him in the training room at dawn. A space she'd only glimpsed in passing, all mats and mirrors and equipment designed to keep killers sharp. He was alone, attacking a heavy bag with methodical precision. Barefoot, shirtless, sweat-slicked. Each punch landed with the sound of controlled violence. Lesedi leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're avoiding me." His rhythm didn't break. "I'm protecting you. By locking me in a box. By keeping you alive." 3 more punches, each harder than the last. The Nakamura family doesn't make idle threats. And you don't make promises you can't keep. She pushed off the wall, moving closer despite, every instinct screaming to maintain distance. "But you promised your mother you'd keep me safe. That I'd be here when she—" The words stuck. "When she's gone." Kizashi finally stopped. His chest heaved, knuckles wrapped in tape that was starting to show red. When he turned to face her, his expression was carefully blank, but his eyes were exhausted. "I didn't promise her anything." Liar. The word hung between them, dangerous and true. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or recognition that she'd learned to read him too well in too short a time. "You want the truth." His voice was low, rough. "Fine. 3 nights ago, we intercepted communications. The Nakamura family has a timeline. They're planning to move against us within the month. And their primary target isn't me or my business operations." He took a step closer. "It's you, because someone in their intelligence network decided you matter to me." Lesedi's heart kicked against her ribs. "Do I?" The question was a grenade with the pin pulled. Kizashi stared at her, chest still heaving from exertion or emotion. She couldn't tell anymore. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "That's irrelevant. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." He grabbed a towel, wiping his face with movements that were almost violent. "You should go back to your room." "What if I don't wanna?" "Lesedi, what if I'm tired of hiding? Of being moved around like furniture? Of watching everyone dance around the fact that your mother is dying and you're falling apart, and I'm stuck in the middle of a war I didn't start?" Her voice cracked. "What if I want to know why you look at me like I'm something you want and something you're terrified of at the exact same time?" The towel dropped from his hands. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, And suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could see the scar through his left eyebrow, count the flecks of lighter brown in his dark eyes, feel the heat radiating off his skin. "Because you are," he said, voice raw. "I've killed 23 people. Maybe more. I lost count after my father died. I've built an empire on fear and blood and violence. And I've never regretted any of it because regret is a luxury that gets you killed in my world." He raised his hand, stopped just short of touching her face, fingers trembling in the air between them. "And then you show up. This woman who saves my mother on instinct, who refuses to shrink, who sits with me at 2 a.m. and closes my laptop like you have the right to care whether I'm destroying myself. You look at me and you see," his voice broke, "I don't even know what you see. But it terrifies me because everyone I've ever cared about ends up dead or destroyed, and I cannot." The door burst open. One of Kizashi's lieutenants, a man named Huang who always looked like he'd just sucked on a lemon, stood there, phone in hand, expression grim. "We have a problem." Kizashi's mask slammed back into place instantly. "What?" "Park talked before we disposed of him. The Nakamura family knows the girl's routine. They know about the secure wing." Huang's eyes flicked to Lessetti with something that might have been pity or calculation. "They know she's your weakness now." The room temperature dropped to Arctic. "She's not," Kizashi started. "With respect, sir, everyone in the organization knows that's a lie." Huang shifted his weight. "Some of the men are concerned. They think we should eliminate the liability." Lasiti's blood turned to ice. Eliminate. Such a clean word for murder. Kizashi went very, very still. When he spoke, his voice was death itself. "Repeat that. They're saying the girl is making you weak. That if the Nakamura family wants her so badly, maybe we should." He didn't get to finish. Kizashi moved like liquid violence, had Huang against the wall with a hand around his throat before Lessetti could blink. "You're suggesting," Kizashi said conversationally, "that I kill an innocent woman to avoid appearing weak. Is that correct?" Huang gasped, face reddening. "Not me. The men." "Tell the men this." Kizashi's voice was soft, lethal. "Anyone who touches her dies. Anyone who suggests harming her dies. Anyone who even looks at her wrong will wish they'd died." He released Huang, who collapsed gasping. "Get out. And send word that I'm calling a full assembly. Tonight. Everyone. No exceptions." Huang scrambled out, leaving Lessetti and Kizashi alone in the terrible silence. "This is my fault," Lessetti whispered. "No." Kizashi's hands were shaking again. Rage or fear, she still couldn't tell. "This is mine. I should have sent you away the moment my mother made her insane declaration. Should have put you on a plane back to Johannesburg with enough money to never look back. Why didn't you?" He finally looked at her, and the raw honesty in his expression nearly broke her. "Because I'm selfish," he said simply. "And I wanted you to stay." The assembly was held in the underground conference room at midnight, a space that existed in blueprints as a wine cellar but functioned as something far more sinister. Lessetti wasn't supposed to be there. Kizashi had been explicit. "Stay in your room. Lock the door. Do not come out until I return." But Tamaki had other plans. "Come," the old woman had said, appearing at Lasiti's door with a wheelchair and a silk shawl that probably cost more than a car. "If they're going to discuss your fate, you should at least bear witness." Kizashi said, "My son says many things. I'm still his mother." Tamaki's smile was sharp. "Besides, they need to see you. Need to understand you're not just an abstraction. You're a person. That makes it harder to suggest murder over breakfast." The logic was twisted, but then again, so was everything about this family. The underground room was carved from concrete and ambition. 40 men in expensive suits sat around a massive table, each one a lieutenant in Kazashi's organization. Lessetti recognized some from the estate, the head of security, the finance manager, the man who coordinated shipments she pretended not to know were drugs or weapons or worse. They all turned when Tamaki's wheelchair rolled in, Lessetti walking behind her like a lamb to slaughter. The room went silent. Hostile eyes tracked her every movement. This black woman who'd somehow infiltrated their world, who their boss was apparently willing to die for. She could feel their resentment like humidity, thick and suffocating. Kizashi stood at the head of the table, and when he saw her, fury flashed across his face before he controlled it. But he didn't send her away. Tamaki had backed him into a corner with an audience, and they both knew it. "Sit," Tamaki commanded, gesturing to an empty chair along the wall. "And be silent. Just listen." Lessetti sat. Her hands were shaking, so she folded them in her lap, trying to channel every ounce of dignity her grandmother had taught her. When they want you to shrink, expand. When they want you to speak, observe. When they want you gone, root yourself like a tree. Kizashi's voice cut through the tension. "We're here because some of you have concerns. About her." He didn't look at Lessetti, but she felt the weight of the pronoun. "So voice them. Now, this is your only opportunity." A man at the far end, someone Lessetti had never seen before, with silver hair and a scar bisecting his cheek, spoke first. "She's a security risk. The Nakamura family has her face, her routine, her connection to you. They'll use her as leverage." "Noted." Next, another voice. "She's a distraction. You've relocated resources to protect one person when we're in the middle of territorial negotiations with the Jade Serpents. Your point." "My point is that one Maid isn't worth compromising operations that generate 40 million one monthly." The casual reduction of her humanity to a financial calculation made Lessetti's stomach turn. But she stayed silent, stayed still, just as Tamaki had instructed. Huang, still sporting bruises on his throat from earlier, cleared his throat nervously. "Some of us think if the Nakamura family wants her badly enough to expose their intelligence network, maybe we should use her as bait." The room erupted in murmurs, some agreeing, some objecting. Lessetti's pulse thundered in her ears. They were discussing her murder with the same tone they'd used to discuss quarterly profits. Kizashi let the chaos continue for exactly 30 seconds before he slammed his hand on the table. The sound was a gunshot. Silence followed instantly. "Let me clarify something," he said, voice deadly calm. "Lessetti Nkosi is under my personal protection. That means she has the same status as my mother, as our core assets, as this organization itself. Anyone who harms her, uses her, or suggests either again will not live to regret it." "But sir," someone started. "I'm not finished." Kizashi's eyes swept the room, and Lessetti watched grown men flinch under his gaze. "You think she's my weakness. You're wrong. The Nakamura family thinks targeting her will break me. They're wrong too." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a conviction that made Lessetti's breath catch. "She's not a weakness. She's a line in the sand, and anyone who crosses it, enemy or ally, will learn exactly what I'm capable of when properly motivated." The silence was absolute. Then Tamaki spoke from her wheelchair, voice carrying despite its softness. "My son is correct. This woman saved my life, which means she saved our future. In our world, that creates a debt that transcends strategy." She turned to look directly at Lessetti, and her eyes were wet. "She is family now, whether any of you like it or not." The old man with the scar leaned back, studying Lessetti with new calculation. "If she's family, she should understand what that means. The danger, the cost, the fact that once you're in, there's no way out except death. Lesedi found her voice before she could stop herself. I understand. 40 pairs of eyes snapped to her. Kizashi's jaw clenched. But she stood anyway, legs somehow steady despite her terror. I understand that I saved Madame Shimada because it was the right thing to do. I understand that decision put me in your world without my consent. I understand that some of you want me dead because I'm inconvenient. Her voice didn't shake. Her grandmother would have been proud. But I also understand that I'm not going anywhere. Not because I want to be here. Believe me, I don't. But because running would mean letting fear win. And I've spent too much of my life being afraid. She met Kizashi's eyes across the room. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe respect. So if I'm family now, she continued, then treat me like it. Stop talking about me like I'm not in the room. Stop planning my death like it's a business decision. And start figuring out how we survive the Nakamura family together. The silence that followed was different, thoughtful instead of hostile. The scarred man smiled slowly. She has spine. I'll give her that. She has more than spine, Tamaki said quietly. She has exactly what this family needs. Kizashi dismissed the assembly shortly after. As men filed out, several nodded to Lesedi. Not quite respect, but acknowledgement. She'd earned something tonight, though she wasn't sure what. When the room emptied, only 3 remained. Kizashi, Tamaki, and Lesedi. The old woman smiled, satisfied with her manipulation. Well played, both of you, she said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm tired. Kizashi walked Lesedi back to her room and talked to her, properly this time. She left before either could protest. Lesedi and Kizashi stared at each other in the concrete room that smelled like secrets and violence. You shouldn't have spoken, he said finally. You shouldn't have let them discuss killing me like it was a budget cut. I was handling it. By threatening to murder your own men? Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Lesedi laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed off concrete walls. This is insane. This whole situation is absolutely insane. I know. Kizashi moved closer, and his expression was raw in a way she'd never seen outside that 2 a.m. conversation. I know, and I'm sorry. For all of it. For my mother's scheme. For the danger. For the fact that you're trapped in a world you never asked to enter. Are you sorry I stayed? The question hung between them like a confession. No, he whispered. I'm not. And that makes me a selfish bastard, but I'm not sorry you're here. If this story hits you, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from. It really helps us know our audience, and we'll appreciate it. Lesedi's heart did something complicated and dangerous. Then stop apologizing and figure out how to keep us both alive. His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Deal. The mint was Kizashi's only request that felt human. Lesedi discovered this on day 9 of her captivity. She'd stopped calling it protection somewhere around day 6. Tamaki had mentioned it in passing during their afternoon tea, a small smile playing at her lips. My son drinks mint tea every night before bed. Says it's the only thing that helps him sleep. The cook grows it fresh in the Eastern Garden. It was manipulation, obviously. Tamaki was about as subtle as a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. But Lesedi was going stir-crazy in the windowless suite, and the idea of doing something, anything that felt normal was too tempting to resist. The Eastern Garden was small, tucked behind the main house where the security cameras had blind spots. Lesedi knew this because she'd spent her imprisonment memorizing the estate's layout, planning escapes she'd never attempt. The mint grew in terracotta pots near a stone fountain that burbled peacefully in the twilight. She was cutting stems with kitchen scissors, thinking about how bizarre her life had become I'm harvesting herbs for a mafia boss who might be falling for me, or might just be bored, when something glinted at her feet. Small, black, metallic, a tracker. Her blood turned to ice. She'd seen enough spy movies to recognize the device, and her brain supplied the terrifying logic immediately. Someone put this here. Someone knew I'd come here. Someone is. The hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. Don't fight, a voice hissed in accented English. Come quietly, and you won't be hurt. Lacity's body made executive decisions her brain hadn't approved. She bit down hard on the palm, covering her mouth, tasting blood and violence. The man cursed, grip loosening for just a second, enough for her to drive her elbow back into what she hoped was a kidney. He stumbled. She ran, made it exactly 4 steps before another figure emerged from behind the fountain. Bigger, faster. His arm hooked around her waist, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. The scissors fell from her hand, clattering against stone. Stubborn bitch, he muttered. Should have just. The gunshot was so loud in the quiet garden that Lacity's ears rang. The man holding her dropped instantly, and she fell with him, landing hard on her hands and knees in the mint she'd been harvesting. Kizashi stood 10 feet away, gun raised, face carved from pure controlled rage. He was in dress pants and a half-buttoned shirt, barefoot, like he'd run from his room. Behind him, security flooded the garden like a dark tide. Lasseti. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, couldn't process. There was blood on her hands, the dead man's blood, and mint crushed beneath her knees, and Kizashi was lowering his gun, but his hands were shaking, and he crossed to her in 3 strides, dropping to his knees in the dirt and blood beside her. His hands, those hands that had just killed a man, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Look at me. Lasseti, look at me. Are you hurt? I know. I don't think. Her voice sounded wrong, detached. Shock probably. There was a tracker. On the ground. They were waiting. Kizashi's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. He pulled her against his chest, one arm around her back, the other hand in her hair, and she realized he was trembling. Not from fear. From fury barely contained. Sir. One of the guards approached, cautiously. The other assailant escaped over the east wall. We have teams in pursuit. I want him alive, Kizashi said into Lacity's hair. I want to know who sent them, how they breached security, and who the fuck planted that tracker. And I want answers before sunrise or I start executing people until someone produces them. The guard paled and disappeared. Lasseti pulled back slightly to look at Kizashi's face. His eyes were wild, desperate, nothing like the controlled mask he wore for the world. You came, she whispered stupidly. How did you know? I always know where you are. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and his voice dropped to something raw and honest. Every second of every day. I know exactly where you are because the thought of not knowing, of something happening and me being too late, he stopped, jaw working. I can't. Can't what? Can't lose you. Can't breathe when you're in danger. Can't think about anything except keeping you safe. His forehead dropped to hers. This is what they wanted. They wanted to prove you, make me weak. And they're right. You do. Lacity's heart was doing acrobatics. Kizashi. But they're also wrong. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. Because you don't make me weak. You make me terrified. And terrified men are the most dangerous kind. Footsteps approached. Tamaki, being wheeled out by her attendant, face grave. Is she hurt? No, Kizashi said, not looking away from Lasseti. But we're moving her. The secure wing isn't secure enough. She stays in my quarters from now on. 24-hour guard rotation. No exceptions. Your quarters? Lacidi's brain was finally catching up. I can't. You can, and you will. He stood, pulling her up with him, and his next words were addressed to everyone present. As of tonight, Lesedi is under my direct protection. That means she doesn't leave my sight unless I explicitly authorize it. Anyone who has a problem with that can tender their resignation immediately. Silence. No one resigned. Tamaki smiled like a woman who'd just won a chess match she'd been planning for months. Finally, she murmured, "There it is." "What?" Lesedi asked, still trying to process everything. The old woman's eyes twinkled. "The truth you've both been dancing around. He would burn this entire organization to ash before letting harm come to you. And you," she looked at Lesedi knowingly, "you didn't run when you had the chance. You could have screamed for any guard. Could have stayed in your room where it was safe. But you came to the garden to pick mint for him." The observation landed like an accusation. Or a benediction. Kizashi's hand found Lacidi's, threading their fingers together. His palm was rough, warm, steady despite everything. "We'll discuss this later," he said quietly. "Right now, I need to handle the men who thought they could take you from my home." The promise in his voice was darker than the night sky. As he led her toward the house, Lesedi looked back once at the garden. Mint crushed under her feet. Blood soaking into earth. The small black tracker still glinting near the fountain. Evidence of the moment everything changed. Again. Kizashi's quarters were nothing like Lesedi expected. She'd imagined something cold, minimalist, designed to intimidate. Instead, the space was warm. Dark wood, soft lighting, bookshelves crammed with volumes in Korean, Japanese, and English. A worn leather chair by the window. Photographs on the desk. A younger Kizashi with his father, both unsmiling. Tamaki on her wedding day, fierce and beautiful. Human things. Evidence of a man beneath the monster. "Bathroom is through there," Kizashi said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll sleep on the couch. You take the bed. You can't sleep on a couch in your own room. I've slept in worse places." He was already pulling blankets from a closet, movements mechanical, avoiding her eyes. "There's clothes in the dresser that should fit. My mother had them sent up earlier." Of course she did. Tamaki probably had this entire scenario planned 3 moves ahead. Lesedi should have showered. Should have changed out of the clothes still stained with another man's blood. Instead, she stood in the middle of the room, adrenaline finally crashing, and said, "He died because of me." Kizashi's hands stilled on the blankets. "He died because he tried to abduct you." Same thing. "No." He turned to face her, and his expression was hard. "He died because he made a choice. He chose money over honor, violence over sense. His death is on him, not you. You don't feel anything, do you, about killing him?" The question was cruel, and she knew it, but she needed to know, needed to understand what kind of man she was. What? Falling for? Trapped with? Both. Kizashi crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I feel everything," he said quietly. "Every single life I've taken sits in here." He pressed a fist to his chest. "Like stones. I carry them. I remember their faces. But I don't regret them, because regret in my world is suicide. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." His hand came up, fingers ghosting along her jaw. "But if you're asking if I regret killing the man who tried to take you, no. I'd do it again. I'd kill 100 men before I let anyone hurt you." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they lit something in her chest that felt dangerously like safety. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do I matter this much?" "Because you see me." His thumb brushed her lower lip, and his voice cracked. "You sit with me at 2 a.m. when I'm drowning in ghosts. You close my laptop and tell me to stop punishing myself. You stand in a room full of killers and refuse to shrink. You pick mint in a garden because my mother mentioned I like tea and you almost die for it. And you're still here asking me questions instead of running. I don't have anywhere to run to. Yes, you do. I'd put you on a plane tonight if you asked. I'd set you free. Would you? He leaned his forehead against hers, eyes closed, breathing ragged. No, probably not, because I'm selfish and broken, and I need you in ways that make me hate myself. Lacidi's hands came up to his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palms. I don't want to leave. You should. I know. She tilted her face up, lips inches from his. But I don't. The space between them was electric, charged with everything they hadn't said. His hand slid into her hair, and she could feel him trembling. This man who killed without hesitation, who ruled an empire through fear, shaking because she was close. Lacetti. Her name was a warning. A plea. Shut up, she whispered, and kissed him. For a moment, he froze, like he couldn't believe it was real. Then he kissed her back with the desperation of a drowning man finding air. His hands pulled her closer, one fisted in her hair, the other spanning her waist. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, honest, tasting like mint and blood and terrible decisions. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kizashi pressed his forehead to hers again. This is a mistake, he said. Probably. My world will destroy you. Let it try. He laughed, sharp, pained, real. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can I be both? His smile was small but genuine, and it transformed his entire face. For just a second, she saw the boy he might have been if violence hadn't claimed him at 12. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Kizashi pulled back instantly, mask sliding into place. What? One of his lieutenants, a man named Chun with silver streaks in his hair, entered, tablet in hand. His eyes flicked to Lacetti, to the way she and Kizashi were still standing too close, then away. Professional. We caught the second assailant, Chun said. He's being held in the basement. He's asking to speak with you, directly. Says he has information about the Nakamura family's endgame. Kizashi's jaw tightened. I'll be down in 5 minutes. Chun left. Silence filled the room like smoke. I have to go, Kizashi said unnecessarily. I know. He cupped her face one more time, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Lock the door, behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me, or my mother. Understand? Kizashi, I'm not a child. Understand. The command in his voice was absolute. Yes, she relented. He kissed her forehead, chaste, protective, and then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Lacetti locked it as instructed, then stood in the middle of his room, heart still racing, lips still tingling. She just kissed a killer. Had told him she wasn't leaving. Had chosen this impossible, dangerous thing over safety. And the terrifying part, she didn't regret it. Not yet. She moved to the window, looking out over the estate bathed in moonlight. Somewhere below, in a basement she'd never seen, Kizashi was about to do terrible things to extract information. And she was here, in his bed, wearing his protection like armor. Her phone buzzed, a rare occurrence since they'd confiscated it for security. But Tamaki must have had it returned. A single message from her mother in Johannesburg. The money arrived. Your brother got his acceptance letter. Thank you, my darling. We're so proud. Lacetti's throat tightened. This was why she'd come to Korea. For moments like this. For family. For futures built on sacrifice. But now she was building a different future entirely. One she couldn't explain to her mother. One that involved mint gardens and blood-soaked earth, and a man who killed to keep her safe. She texted back, I'm glad. I love you all. Then she deleted the message thread, powered off the phone, and tried not to think about what Kizashi was doing in the basement. Tried not to wonder if she could love a man whose hands were stained red. Tried not to admit she already did. The screaming from the basement stopped at 4 a.m. Lesedi knew because she'd been awake, counting the hours, imagining horrors she had no reference for. When Kizashi finally returned, dawn was bleeding through the windows, painting everything gold and red like a promise or a warning. He looked exhausted, haunted. There was blood on his shirt cuff that he hadn't bothered to hide. "It's over," he said simply, stripping off the shirt and dropping it in a hamper like it was contaminated. "The Nakamura family won't touch you again." "What did you do?" "What I had to." He moved to the bathroom, and she heard water running. When he emerged, his hands were scrubbed raw. The man talked, gave us everything. Their timeline, their contacts, their endgame. And I sent a message that will either end this war or escalate it beyond repair. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch, but carefully not touching. "I'm sorry you're caught in this. Stop apologizing." Lesedi reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "I made my choice last night. I'm still making it now." Something cracked in his expression, relief or grief, she couldn't tell. "My mother wants to see us. Both of us. She says it's time." The words carried weight she didn't understand. Time for what? "I don't know, but when she uses that tone, it's never good." They found Tamaki in the garden, the same eastern garden where Lesedi had nearly been taken. The old woman sat in her wheelchair beneath the cherry tree that hadn't yet bloomed, wrapped in blankets despite the warming morning. She looked smaller than usual. "Freilier, sit," she commanded, gesturing to the bench across from her. They sat. Kizashi's hand never left Lesedi's. Tamaki studied them both with eyes that had seen too much and somehow still sparkled with schemes. "You kissed," she said simply. Not a question. Kizashi tensed. "Mother. Don't lie to me. I'm dying, not blind." She smiled, and it was sad and satisfied all at once. "Good. That's good. Now we can speak honestly." "About what?" Lesedi asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Tamaki reached into her robe and pulled out an envelope. Old, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax. "This is for you, Lesedi. From me. To be opened after I'm gone." "Don't," Kizashi said sharply. "Don't talk like." "Hush, my son. Death comes for us all. I've made my peace." She held out the envelope to Lesedi. "Inside is the truth. About why I chose you. About what you really saved that day." Lesedi's hands trembled as she took it. "I don't understand." "You will." Tamaki turned to Kizashi. "And you, my beautiful boy, you need to know something before I go. Something I should have told you years ago." The air shifted. Kizashi went very still. "What?" "Your father's death. The assassination. You've spent 20 years hunting the Nakamura family for it." Tamaki's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. "They didn't kill him." The world tilted. "What?" Kizashi's voice was barely audible. "I did." The silence was absolute. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. "You're lying," Kizashi whispered, but his face said he knew she wasn't. "I poisoned him 3 days before the shooting. Slow acting. The Nakamura family just happened to get to him first, and I let them take the blame." Tamaki's hands were shaking. "Your father was going to sell you, Kizashi, to settle a debt. You were 12 years old, and he was going to trade you to our enemies like livestock. So I killed him, and I've carried that secret for 22 years. Lesedi felt Kizashi's hand go rigid in hers. His breathing had stopped. Everything had stopped. Why? The word was torn from him. Why tell me this now? Because I'm dying, and you deserve the truth. Because every man you've killed in revenge was innocent of the crime you blamed them for. Because her voice broke. Because I need you to understand that love makes monsters of us all. I became one to save you. And now you're becoming one to save her. She gestured to Lesedi, and her meaning was clear. The Nakamura family knows, Tamaki continued. They've always known. That's why they've been targeting us. Not for territory. For revenge. For a murder they were blamed for, but didn't commit. Kizashi stood abruptly, dropping Lesedi's hand. His face was a mask of horror and rage and betrayal. Everything I've built. Everyone I've killed. It was all a lie I let you believe because I was a coward. Tamaki reached for him, but he stepped back. Kizashi, please. Don't. His voice was ice. Don't touch me. Don't. I can't. He turned and walked away. Not running. Just walking with the measured pace of a man whose entire world had just shattered. Lesedi started to follow, but Tamaki's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Let him go. He needs time. You just destroyed him. I freed him. Tamaki's eyes were fierce despite the tears. The truth is a gift, even when it burns. And now he can choose, continue the war built on my lies, or end it and build something real with you. Why tell me about the envelope? What's in it? Tamaki's smile was mysterious and terrible. Insurance. For when you need it most. Open it only when you're certain of your choice, to stay or to run. But know this, child. What's written there will change everything. Again. A commotion erupted from the house. Shouting. Running feet. Chin appeared. Face pale. Phone in hand. Madam Shimada, we have a problem. The Nakamura family. They've released a statement. To the media. They're claiming. He stopped, eyes flicking to Lesedi. They're claiming Kizashi kidnapped a foreign national. A South African woman. They've provided photos, evidence, everything. It's already going viral. Lesedi's blood turned to ice. They're forcing his hand, Tamaki said calmly, like she'd expected this. Either he releases her and appears weak, or he keeps her and confirms their narrative. Either way, he loses. Unless, Chin said slowly, he makes it legitimate. A marriage would change the narrative from kidnapping to a love story, Tamaki finished. Yes, that would work. No, Lesedi said, standing. No, I'm not, this isn't, you can't just. The envelope in her hands felt like it was burning. Kizashi reappeared, and his face was carved from stone. Behind him, more men in suits. Police? Government officials? Lesedi couldn't tell. Lesedi, he said, and his voice was empty. I need you to make a choice. Right now. Marry me and end this. Or leave, and I'll handle the fallout alone. That's not a choice, that's an ultimatum. It's the only choice I can give you. Tamaki watched them both, the envelope between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. And in Lesedi's pocket, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Open the envelope. Before you decide. You need to know who she really is. Lesedi's hands shook as she looked at the sealed letter. At Kizashi's devastated face. At Tamaki's knowing smile. What's in this? She demanded. Tamaki's answer was barely a whisper. The reason I was really in that car the day it crashed. The reason I chose you. The reason. She stopped coughing. Open it, child. And then decide if love is worth the monster you'll have to become. Lesedi broke the seal. Read the first line. And her entire world inverted. The letter began. Dear Lesedi Nkosi, daughter of James Nkosi. The man I killed 30 years ago in Johannesburg. The debt I've been trying to repay ever since. If you enjoyed this story and would love to hear more, kindly subscribe to the channel and tell us your favorite part of the story. We'd really appreciate that.